Good afternoon. I just wanted to get back into the topic of what at this time is shaping up to be the culmination of related and unrelated circumstances that I believe the government is going to use as the excuse to suspend and ultimately replace the Constitution of the United States with what is now the proposed Constitution of the new states of America. Reminder for those of you who have not yet had an opportunity to read William Cooper's Behold a Pale Horse, or if you haven't had an opportunity to listen to the previous outline I did on this topic, the New World Order can and likely will be ushered in under a guise of public safety, and with a declaration of national emergency by the president. And if this happens, it's enter FEMA and goodbye America. I think it's also key to remember in the proposed Constitution for the new states of America, the words national emergency is used 134 times. And the Bill of Rights has been completely eradicated from its pages. And if you are so inclined, and I encourage you to read through that document, you will see also that personal sovereignty and freedom has been eradicated from that document. I really, truly think it's crucial for American citizens to familiarize themselves with these proposed and planned laws and orders so that we may, in our very intentional awareness and understanding, continue to keep our freedom within our grasp, and further to keep that freedom, the hope of that freedom, from being absolutely obliterated from the mouths and psyches of our children. Last that I covered this topic, we were talking about the national emergency, a total takeover. And we are going to go straight forward into the implementing of the new government as reported by William Cooper. And here we go. Well, you see, there's much more to life in a free country than paying your mortgage. You have to be aware of what's going on and act accordingly and participate in government. That is, get involved. Examining the organization chart on Executive Order 11490 to discover how we have all helped finance through our tax dollars the mechanics of the overthrow of our Constitution, Executive Order 11490 designates certain authorities to the Office of Emergency Preparedness, which in turn designates authority to the various departments of the federal government. If order were implemented, the Post Office Department would be responsible for a national registration. The State Department would be responsible for protection of the United Nations personnel or property, and prevention of escape from the United States. Let me read that again. Prevention of escape from the United States. The Department of Defense would be responsible for the expropriation of industry, direction of services and national production system, control of censorship. Let me read that again. Control of censorship and communication, expropriation of non-industrial facilities. The Commerce Department would be responsible for expropriation, selection, and international distribution of commodities, which would be the actual looting of the United States, census information, and human resources. The Treasury Department would be responsible for collection of cash and non-cash items. Let me say that one more time. The Treasury Department would be responsible for collection of cash and non-cash items and the recreation of evidence of assets and liabilities. The Justice Department would have concurrent responsibility with the Department of State for prevention of escape from the United States, for replenishing the stockpile of narcotics, for a national police force, for correctional and penal institutions, for mass feeding and housing of prisoners, and for use of prisoners to augment manpower. Let us be clear, this means slave labor. The federal bank, which is not a federal bank, would be responsible for regulation of withdrawal of currency. The General Services Administration would be responsible for confiscation of private property for government use. I'm going to read that again. The General Services Administration would be responsible for confiscation of private property for government use. You all okay with this? Health, Education, and Welfare would be responsible for nationalization of education, which the Department of Education has already done, health services, hospitals, and mental institutions. Everybody should be very, very concerned about every little bit of this. The Labor Department would be responsible for recruiting manpower, selecting manpower, referring manpower, and allocating manpower so that each particular person that was registered at the post office in his national registration would be told where he or she was going to work. Do I need to read that again? HUD, or the Housing of Urban Development, would be responsible for transfer of persons to temporary or permanent housing in regional emergency planning and cooperation. We are talking about concentration camps here. We are talking about concentration camps on United States soil filled with United States citizens. In regional emergency planning and cooperation, the Transportation Department is responsible for emergency enforcement and control and movement of passengers and the emergency operation of the Alaska Railroad. There are two specific agencies here that we need to look at and to keep in mind. They are the Health, Education, Welfare, and Justice Department. And those two agencies are related to the Department of Defense. Let me say that again. The HEW and the Justice Department are related to the Department of Defense. The various military departments are part of the Department of Defense. Under it, we have the Secretary of Army, Chief of Staff, Deputy Chief of Staff of Personnel and Law Enforcement, U.S. Army Force Command, and Continental Army Reserve and National Guard. And under that, we have the four armies dividing up the United States. Under the Fifth Army, we have the Provost Marshal, who is directly connected to the Deputy Chief or Staff for law enforcement personnel. Under the Provost Marshal for the Fifth Army, we have 300 Military Police Prisoner of War Command at Livonia, Michigan. At this point, I quote from retired Admiral Elmo Zumwaite's book, On Watch, and Kissinger states, I believe the American people lack the will to do the things necessary to achieve and to maintain maritime superiority. I believe we must get the best deal we can in our negotiations before the United States and the Soviets both perceive these changes and the balance that occurs. When these perceptions are in agreement and both sides know the U.S. is inferior, we must have gotten the best deal we can. Americans at that time will not be happy that I have settled for second, but it will be too late. Zumwalt said, quote, then why not take it to the American people? They will not accept the decision to become second best while they are in a position of gross national product twice the size of the USSR. Kissinger responds, that's a question of judgment. I judge that we will not get their support, and if we seek it and tell that fact, as we would have to, we would lose our negotiating leverage with the Soviets. Zumwalt stated, but isn't that the ultimate immorality in a democracy? To make a decision for the people of such importance without consulting them. Kissinger stated, perhaps, but I doubt that there are 1 million who could even understand the issue. Zumwalt responded, even if that presumption is correct, those 1 million can influence the opinions of a majority of the people. I believe it is my duty to take other course. To which Kissinger responded, you should take care then, lest your words result in a reduction in the Navy budget. End quotes. So we see what the intention of the State Department is regarding the people. Another fact, on December 30th of 1975, the California National Guard announced in a press release, which I have, that the state's military police battalions were organized and trained to provide immediate response to virtually every civil and man-made disaster, as well as to assist law enforcement officers in emergency situations, to carry out their law enforcement as well as their military mission. When I asked 4 of the defendants in the case for their mission statement, they did not provide it, although they say it is public information. The training spoken of for the California National Guard covers such subjects as dealing with individual civilians/civil population, detention procedures, citizens' rights, and similar matters. And you know as well as I do that when there is martial law or martial rule, citizens have no rights. Does everybody understand that? Because the Constitution is preempted. Even the uniforms of the National Guard who participate in this program are different from the regular uniforms. Army spokesmen will not reveal more about the uniforms, but Los Angeles Sheriff's Department paramilitary units who have received this training also have Army fatigues dyed black for their uniforms. A further fact is the disaster preparedness plan for the Marine Corps Supply Center in Barstow, California. Quoting from that document, quote, under the Constitution and the laws of the United States, the preservation of law and order is the responsibility of local and state government. And the authority to maintain the peace and enforce the law is invested in the authorities of those governments. There are specific examples to the above concept. One of these pertains to federal intervention to civil disturbances in certain situations. Military commanders are deemed to have the inherent authority to take any measure reasonably necessary for the protection of life and property in the event of a sudden, unexpected public calamity which disrupts the normal processes of government and presents an emergency so imminent as to make it dangerous to await instructions from appropriate authorities. This includes law enforcement duties. The manual mentions something called garden plot forces, which we will discuss at length further in this book. Don Bell, who writes a weekly report, reported on July 25th of 1975 that in May of 1975, the 303rd Civil Affairs Group of the U.S. Army Reserves in Kearney, New Jersey, conducted an exercise to sharpen the plans for, quote, military takeover of the state government in New Jersey. According to Colonel Francis Clark, they had conducted similar studies on how to seize municipal and county government over the past few years, but this was the first time they had studied state government. Such units were trained during World War II to operate captured governments in the foreign. We had never had federal troops training to take over governments in the United States. When local violence or catastrophe struck, the National Guard, under command of the governor, went into action. This is definitely not the situation at this time. Let me encourage you, if you have any way at all, I'm pretty sure that I saw earlier today on YouTube that you can find somebody actually doing a full audio reading of Behold the Pale Horse by Wayne Cooper. I didn't try to click into that, so I'm not sure how thoroughly done that is. I encourage you to try to familiarize yourselves with the information contained within this book, and try to keep in mind during this time in particular, and I say this cautiously and with peace behind, but be aware that the government is not your friend. They are not here to help us. They are not for our best interest. And though the many men and women who make up our military, our National Guard, and our police force are wonderful, good-hearted, decent human beings who are well connected between their minds and their souls, understand that though these individuals in and of themselves may be good people, they are not employed by good agencies, and they are not governed by people who have our best interests at heart. So I hope everybody is staying well out there. It is a horrendous rainy day here in Eugene, Oregon. We are sort of putting our city back together from some of the rioting that happened downtown last night. Such an absolute disgrace. And I just want to take this time to bring attention again to George Floyd, which was meant to be the purpose of these protests before it became about all of the other things. So take care, everybody, and be well.